Hold on, everybody. Having a little bit of technical difficulty here for a second. My webcam is not working. So just give me one sec. All right, there we go. Let's see. It's going to come back here now. It's just going to be really big. There we go. Okay. Hello. Sorry about that. Not sure what was going on with my my webcam there. That was a little weird, but also I don't think my music is playing either. So let's do this. There we go. Okay. I'm going to mellow this out a little bit. I need a little bit more mellow. Let's go a little more mellow here for some music. There we go. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. Hello, hello, hello. Good to see you. Good to see you. That's a little bit more my speed right now. Hello. Good to see everyone. I hope you're ready to jump in and do some Photoshop today. Hopefully you had a chance to run out, grab a tablet, a drawing tablet of any kind. Remember, we kind of talked about it last week. You need one of these guys to get the job done for the next several weeks of the semester, right? So hopefully you ran out and snagged one. If not, the nice thing is we are on YouTube. So the nice thing is we are on YouTube. So the VOD does save to YouTube and you can watch it back later. Granted, I would suggest being here live. Just because you get live interaction with me. So today we have a couple of assignments to work through. You have 2 assignments for this week. The first one I am not going to demo. The second one I am going to demo. So the first one is pretty straightforward, and I'm going to show you guys quickly how it functions and works. It's one that you can do hopefully in the next day. And then the other one is going to be your week-long assignment. So let's just get into that really quickly here. This is not your course. Let's go to your course. So we have design 1, right? That is coming up. That's going to be due next week. Okay. Let's go here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to nuke this. So, design 1 that's coming up this following week, right? Which is you hand drawing some simple game characters, right? Kind of talked about it a little bit last week, but this is the assignment that's coming up. We're going to talk about it more in depth here in just a minute. But you also have another assignment. You have this assignment that is due tomorrow, right? So it's quick, should hopefully be done by the end of the class, if not by the end of the night tonight. It should only take you, 30 minutes or so. You're just going to do a couple things here, right? So you are going to draw this little Totoro, right? And you're going to learn how to use the smoothing function that exists in Photoshop. And I'm going to show you where that is in just a minute when we jump into our intro to Photoshop, okay? But there's a couple things here. Excuse me. There's just a couple things here that you are going to tackle. You are going to draw him once with no smoothing on. You're going to turn up the smoothing, draw him again, and then turn up the smoothing one more time and draw him one more time, right? Just to kind of figure out where you like it, where you want to keep that slider set to, right? So, okay. So the first one should be done with 0 smoothing. Second one should be done with a little bit of an adjustment. Third one, it should be can be done with as much or as little smoothing as you want, okay? So label each sketch. They should just be quick, right? You don't need to spend 3 hours on each Totoro. It's just quickly drawing with each different adjustment with the smoothing slider, okay? And we'll get into that and where it is and how it functions. But that's your assignment that's due tomorrow. And you do have one due next week, okay? Which is this one, which I'm going to demo this tonight. We'll jump into this and I'll talk to you about some different ways to approach this and how I would approach it, okay? So, I do have some slides I want to talk about because this week is all about line, right? Our assignment is focused on line and how we can best use line to our advantage in our designs, right? So we're going to talk about line here for a minute. And I have some slides I want to go through with you. For the slides, I'm going to turn my face off here just so you guys can see these without me kind of getting in the way. I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it on. Maybe I'll keep it on. Depends on where my face lands on some of these. Let's see. Okay, I think we're actually good. So let's talk about line a little bit, okay? And line fundamentals. Here you see on this first page a bunch of different lines. These are definitely part of the conversation, right? This design used some very specific polygonally shaped lines and some angled lines to, make this look a little nicer. Anyways, we're going to talk about a few different things when we're talking about line, okay? A couple things on the agenda here. We're going to go over some vocabulary when it comes to line. We're going to go over different line types. We're going to talk about basic principles of line. And we're going to talk a little bit about position and perception, okay? Get a little bit scientific. So, lines are the foundation of drawing, right? You use them everywhere. When we start drawing, when we start sketching in order to do a paint, all those things. Lines are that foundation. It's that fundamental that you need to understand in order to create a more sound design, right? Lines are important. It's everywhere. Line is everywhere, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more. Line is obviously one of the most familiar elements of design, right? Okay. Lines have length and width, right? If it's not, it can be a very short line, right? But it has to have more length than width to be considered a line, right? Now, a line can be abstractly thought as a zero width object as well, right? So that can get a little bit interesting because now you are talking about the change between two different objects and negative space in order to create lines, right? This white line here is technically a line, yes, but in between this blue space and this white space here, this break in between these is also a line, right? There's a subtle change there. Okay. Then, let's move on here. So, a bunch of different line types here, right? You've got different brushes. You've got thick lines and soft lines, sketchy lines, broken lines, all different things, okay? Now, when we add width to a line, it's called line weight, right? You can see here there's a drastic difference between these two different lines. Now, we added width to it. That's called adding line weight. You know, you have a heavy line versus a light line. It also comes from, you know, tactile drawing where you had a pencil or a paintbrush and you'd paint or draw. And the harder you pressed, the more of the material would come off of the object you were using to paint or draw or sketch, right? So more of that material gets onto the page. It's heavier. It's a thicker line. So that's where that term line weight comes from, okay? So a line's path adds to its definition, okay? So you've got wavy lines, fluid lines, jagged lines, all types of different lines here. Things you've probably been doing since you were a kid, but just to cover it and make sure you understand what we're talking about when I'm talking about a jagged line, a zigzag line, you know, wavy lines, fluid lines, all that type of stuff. Just give you a little bit more vocabulary in your pocket to describe art a little bit better. So, there can also be a relationship. Remember, we talked about the difference between two colors creating a zero width object that creates a line that's implied. Now, we can have the relationship between edges create lines as well, right? And that relationship can determine what that line ends up looking like, right? Now, the two lines drawn on the top is a lot sharper line. That distinction between those lines is a lot easier to identify, right? Where the lines below, while there is still that line, it's a little more fuzzy, right? Because we used a different type of brush, one that was a little softer, okay? So that relationship changes. And you can use that to your advantage in your designs. So I also want to talk about lines placement in space, right? You have lines that can be placed horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. Remember, horizontal is across the screen in the x-axis, vertical is up and down in the y-axis, and diagonal is intersecting either one of those, right? Lines can be actual or implied. We did just chat about this. I'm going to move myself out of the way for a second here. So lines can be actual or implied, right? You have objects that can be set in a row and create the idea of a line as well. It's implied, okay? Because of the objects being so close together, your brain does something called closure, right? Which I think I jump into this here in just a second. There's the idea of closure, right? It happens with objects. Your brain wants to create something that makes sense, right? So to your brain, it wants to fundamentally draw a line here to make this make sense, right? These are actual lines. Even though this looks to more like a shape, this is a sort of a heavy charcoal brush that's creating a line, right? Versus these other lines that are still lines, but a little bit different style. If you were to draw a character with each one of these different line types, the design is going to be drastically different, right? And that's the idea of the assignment this week. Is I want you to experiment with different brushes in order to get a different mood or different feel from your designs, okay? So the next thing I want to talk about is lines called contour lines. And these lines are the lines that make up the overall shape of an object, right? The outermost edge of an object, which usually defines the shape of an object, is called a contour line or an outline, right? So these other lines in between, these are not contour lines or outlines. These are what are called construction lines, which we'll talk about in just a second. But these ones that make the overall shape of the object are called contours, okay? Now we have different line types that we can describe here. I'm going to move my face out of the way again just to get out of your vocabulary words. But we have contour lines. We have scribble lines. You have a sketch loose line, which is something like this, right? Where it gets a little sketchy and loose. You're not pressing hard on the pencil. You're being very light with the strokes, right? You have construction lines, which make up the bones or the structure of the thing you're trying to draw, right? You're using them for measurement and construction. You see it a lot. People will draw things like this in order to place a nose, a mouth, and an eye on a face. Or if they're drawing a building, they create scale lines in order to make them make sense with people, foliage, buildings, right? Now you have wide, narrow. You're talking about line weight earlier. You have hard and soft lines, which we also talked about, where how hard you're pressing on your pencil. Light lines, same thing, right? It all it's all usually determined by how hard or soft you're pressing that brush or pencil or marker to a canvas or your digital pen to your tablet, right? Then we have hatching and shading, right? Different types of hatching are using lots of little lines to create a shadow or the idea of a shadow. You have cross hatching, which is, taking hatching in one direction, which is lots of little lines, and then you come back across the other way and create X's in order to do the same thing, right? It just creates a little bit different feel. So, some basics with line, okay? When we're talking about line, they communicate action, they communicate mood and drama. If you were to look at, some examples from our assignment here, if I jump over really quickly and pull them up, there's a definite tone and mood to some of these sketches and some of these drawings just because of the line weight and selection. So if I go to this assignment and I pull up some of these examples here, let's just go to the first one. So these characters all have a very different feel to them, right? This is a lot more aggressive. It's very bold and bright and saturated, right? The colors play a big difference, but also the line and the boldness of the line and the angular nature of these lines, right? They're very pointy at the ends. They've used a fine tip brush and pressed hard and then let off of the brush to create these angular edges to these lines. This one's a little softer, right? It curves into everything. All of these have a nice little bevel on them. So this feels a little different. This one's a little more sketchy and light. Same thing here with some of these, okay? So drastically different feel just by changing that brush can make a huge difference. Lines are used to create shapes and negative spaces as well, right? They're used all the time to create shapes. Obviously, we talked about contour lines. They're the outermost edge of an object. They can create shapes. They create negative spaces as well, right? That's done in logo design all the time. If you look at the FedEx logo, which is a shipping company here in the United States, I believe they ship worldwide, but FedEx, if you look at this, the logo for FedEx, if you look at this, let me move my face. The logo for FedEx right here is using line and negative space to create an arrow out of the E and the X, right? Showing you that, yeah, FedEx sends your packages to you with this arrow, okay? So it's used in logo design too. But anyways, lines are used to show contours. Lines imply movement or direction. You've seen it all the time in your favorite comic books, your favorite movies. When they use action lines to create mood or drama, they draw a really fast line across the screen to show something going quickly across the screen, right? Lines also organize an element of a design, right? In comic books, in manga, in all different types of design, lines separate panels in order to organize elements, right? They're used everywhere. They're you can't avoid them if you want to do what we do, right? Example. Here we go. Look, right? FedEx. I guess I gave the example here. The FedEx logo, right? You'll never unsee it now. The arrow's there. Fox Chase, which is a publisher. They do a lot of different publishing for books. It's a little fox, but it's also a book, if you can see that in there. A book that's open. The pages are open. Okay. Action lines, like I was talking about. This is a panel from Bleach. You know, those lines are all used to imply movement. This character's falling, right? Or flying. This is examples of construction lines, right? All those lines were placed there in order to properly place these elements in this design. Those crosses and lines were drawn before the first vase was drawn, right? These were there to help understand the arrangement of the objects on the table and get the scale correct. So, because the standard frame of reference for everyone in the world, right? Let me go back. Sorry. The standard frame of reference for everyone in the world is a rectangle, right? You are on your phone all the time. You are watching this class right now on a computer screen or on a tablet screen or on a phone screen, right? When you create art, you're drawing on a piece of paper. The standard frame of reference for everyone in this world is a rectangle, right? When we design things and we place lines parallel to these edges, which means they're running close to the edge on either side, close to the edge of that rectangle, right? They are viewed as more stable, okay? Because they feel like walls and the floor. Now, horizontal lines are viewed as the most stable because they replicate the floor. You draw lines straight through in the x-axis on a rectangle. It's going to feel like the floor, right? Now, you draw a vertical line. It's a little bit more assertive, right? They get tall, right? They feel upright, but they also feel stable. They feel like walls, okay? Now, diagonal lines tend to feel more dynamic just because when something's on an angle, it implies movement, right? Our brain thinks, okay, when things are on walls, they're not really moving. When things are on the floor, they're usually still. If I place a ball on a floor, it's not going to do anything. If I place a ball against a wall, it's not going to move. Now, if I place a ball on an angle, it's going to roll, right? So diagonal lines just tend to feel more dynamic, okay? So think about all these things as you're going through and designing your characters. What am I doing with these lines, right? Not even designing your characters. When you're drawing these characters from these designers, because you're drawing simple characters, right? What were they thinking when they put this together, this design? That's what I want you to think about, right? What was the character artist thinking when they were putting together this design? Why are they using line in this way? And then what I want you to do is take some brushes, change them, vary them, and take a stab at trying to affect the mood or feel of that next sketch, right? So that's all I have to say about line right now. But yeah, so we'll get through that. I will post these slides for you guys if you want to take a look back at them. That's fine. But what I want to do now is jump into Photoshop because that's what you're here for, right? We talked about line a little bit. Sometimes I can get a little boring, which is okay. It's good to know. But I want to jump into Photoshop because I want to show you guys how to use the software so that we can start working on this assignment. It's super fun. The first thing I want to do is talk about the smoothing tool, though, because you do have that assignment coming up. So I want to jump in here. I want to show you how to use the brush tool. I want to show you where the smoothing tool is, and I want you to play with that so that you can start handling this assignment and getting it turned in. Okay. So let's jump in here to Photoshop. So when you first boot up Photoshop, it's going to open you up to this. These are all your recent files. You'll have saved plenty of different things after a while, or maybe you already are saving a bunch of different things. But you'll click new file and it's going to pull up a window that looks like this. Okay. When it boots you into this, okay, it's going to ask you a bunch of different options. Now, in all reality, you can easily bump up this canvas size and create something really awesome. I'm going to do a huge canvas size just because I want to be able to draw and have it be nice fidelity for you guys. You don't have to make it this big. But when you create your canvas, right, now it's going to drop you in. The other thing I failed to mention is you can create your default canvas color. For me, I like painting on like an off-white. I don't love painting on like a straight up bright white. It just hurts my eyes. So I usually kind of start my paint with this background color. And if you click this little custom background contents, you can click this and change whatever and have whatever color background you want. Okay. But I'm doing a 4K photo square, 300 pixel res, just because I would just want to have a nice big canvas that I can paint on and have it look nice. Okay. So now the thing that we can do is jump right into the UI of Photoshop. Now, if you've never used Photoshop before, it can be a little cumbersome. It's not as bad as some of the other softwares we'll use, for sure. There's a lot that goes into Photoshop and all the different tools and menus that happen here. I'm going to do my best to give you a high-level view of what's going on so that you understand the tools that you need to know to complete the assignments each week, right? So this week, I really want to heavily focus on the brush tool and some of the other tools here as well that will help you complete the assignment, right? So on the left-hand side here, when you first boot into Photoshop, you're going to see a bunch of different tools, okay? These range from your text tool to your bucket tool to your brush tool, your eyedropper tool, all different things. Your eraser lives over here as well. This is the tool panel, and it's going to be where all the tools live, okay? And that's by default. You can obviously change your UI as much as you want, but I usually use the straight out of the box vanilla default features, except for one thing, and I'll tell you about it here in just a second. Up top, you have your shelf, right, where there's going to be options for each tool you have selected, right? When I click on different tools, obviously the shelf changes to match which tool I have selected because there will be various options for each tool that I have selected, right? There's different options when I have my brush tool selected versus when I have, let's say, a selection tool selected, right? So this shelf is going to vary between every tool that I select. And obviously we're not going to get into all of them today, but we will talk about some of the features up here for the brush tool. So that's the shelf. Above that, there is a, your standard menus that live in all of your different types of softwares. There's things that live in here that we'll probably use, not today, but maybe in the next coming weeks, we'll jump through here. Don't get too overwhelmed, right? Really, all you need to be able to do is click into Photoshop, be able to click on the brush and be able to start painting, right? That's the most important thing. We want to just be able to start painting, okay? So, I also need to adjust something here. My tablet properties, I think, are off. Nope, they're not. They're good. Okay, that's fine. So, as we move through this, we will learn more and more about each individual piece of the UI, but that's the left-hand side, the top. Now on the right-hand side, there's an equally important portion of the UI, right? This is your color picker. Now you'll notice that maybe when you boot it into Photoshop, my color picker looks a little bit different than yours, right? it looks a little bit different, and that's by design. Okay. So it's because of the fact that I have a different color wheel selected. Okay. And it's not too hard to change, but I believe the default when you're in Photoshop looks something like this, right? And it lives up here. And there is a couple different things that happen. Now, the standard one, I believe, looks like this, right? And I hate this. I don't love this. It's just a weird way to look at things. But it's fine. If you like it, that's totally fine. Now, there's a brightness cube that you can select. There's all these different things. You can do RGB sliders and pick your colors this way. I like the color wheel the most just because this in my brain is easy to use, and it's very easy to use with a pen. I can click and slide along this wheel, get a nice range of colors, and then it also gives me my hue, my saturation, and my key, right? So I don't have to do a ton of fumbling around, right? I can quickly pick my color, change the lightness and darkness, change my saturation, change my hue, and just be done with it, right? And just get back to painting. Really, that is why I like this, because it's just getting me back to painting as fast as possible, okay? But yeah, you can play with those and see which ones you like. There's a bunch of different options here. You have your drawing history, you have some different things, info, you have some brush settings. I'm not too worried about these right now. We'll talk about them in a little while. Maybe not even today. Then you have your properties panel, which again is going to change based off of which object you have or which tool you have selected. You're obviously going to get some different properties, especially when you jump into the shape tool and you start drawing shapes. Then your properties tab is going to change based off of that. You saw it just change to this in order to help you create shapes, right? So anyways, not a huge deal, but just so you know, it's there. We're not really talking about the shape tools today. We're just really going to focus on the brush tool. Okay. And then below that is arguably the most important feature inside of the entire software, and that is your layers channel. Now, those of you that are new to digital painting, this is a concept that is very interesting, right? Because if you've only been doing traditional drawing before, what is the biggest drawback of traditional drawing and painting? What happens if you mess up? Somebody throw it in there. What happens if you mess up drawing, right? And you're drawing with a permanent marker and you mess something up. Make sure you guys are still awake. If you're drawing with permanent marker and you screw up a line, you're crumpling the paper and throwing it in the garbage, right? Starting over. Digital painting has two things. The undo button, which is not real, right? Yeah, you can't undo. So you have the undo button and you have layers. You don't really get layers in real life. You can if you have tracing paper and you start painting over the top of things and doing stuff like that. But these are live, living layers that you can turn on and off. You can change, you can modify, right? Yeah. Throw it away and draw it again. Exactly. You don't have to do that in digital painting. Digital painting is a non-destructive workflow. I can create as many of these layers as my computer can handle, right? My music just got really loud. Don't know why it got so loud. Yeah, you can add as many of these layers as your computer can handle, right? So let's jump in here and I'm going to show you kind of what I'm talking about. So we have our brush tool. Our background is living here. We've created a new layer. It looks like this little plus button right here inside of a square. So we've created a new layer, which essentially means we've added a new piece of paper over the top that we can start painting on. Okay. I'm going to change my brush, which is nice to know now. We can click on these things here. When you're in your brush over here on the left-hand side at the top in your shelf, which we kind of talked about already, if you click this little drop down, you can scroll down and Photoshop has a ton of default brushes. One that I love and I use constantly, it's my favorite brush in Photoshop, is the Kyle's Inking Thick and Thin brush. It's just a really clean, kind of cartoony brush that fits really well with my style of drawing and painting. I really enjoy it. It has a nice feather. It has a nice tail to the strokes. I really enjoy using this brush. Okay. So we're going to draw a little bit here, right? So let's say I'm in here and I'm creating some things, right? I'm drawing, you know, some layers. I'm creating this, you know, character. I have all these different layers. And I jump in here. I don't know what this is. Let's make it a snowman. Right? So let's say I want to add a hat to this snowman. So I want to put this thing here. And this is really bad because I'm just being really sloppy with my art right now. But you want to draw this, but you don't want to have to erase the lines in between the hat and all that stuff. Right now, this is on its own layer, right? I changed layers. I added a layer. So that means I can be selected on my layer 1 and erase my stuff underneath here. And I need to change my brush size. But I can erase what's on layer 1 underneath my layer 2, right? So now, you know, I didn't have to destroy the thing I drew in order to create the other stuff, right? So these layers can do that. You know, you can also have layers that are your inking layers, right? It's going to be a purple snowman. So I want to start painting in and coloring in my purple snowman, right? So I'm going to color underneath him and start inking him in, right? But I don't want to have to destroy, you know, my line art in order to save my you know, my drawing here, right? So I can erase around my line art because that painting is on a different layer, if that makes sense. So layers can be really used to your advantage. You can create as many of them as you want, right? They use very to little to no resource. You can, especially if you have a nice computer, you can add tons of these layers and not worry about it. Okay. So let's talk about the brush tool, because we've talked about layers. Layers are important. We're going to use them all through today. We're going to rename them. We're going to talk about them all the time. But the thing you need to do in order to do the first assignment, which is the Totoro assignment, is understand how to use your brush. So we already talked about selecting a brush from the brush sets in Photoshop. You have your brush tool selected, which is also the B key. B is in boy on your keyboard, right? And when you have that brush key selected, you now have a number of options available to you here, right? We have the ability to change our brush size. I'm going to jump back to my blue default kind of sketch blue that I like to use. Your bracket keys, which are your left and right bracket keys, right? Which look like this on your keyboard. These guys right here. This one and this one. Your left and right brackets are going to be your brush size keys. So you click, you draw, you're in your brush, you hold right bracket key, it's going to make a bigger brush. Left bracket key is going to make a smaller brush, right? Okay. And that's it. That's the brush tool. Now, there are some other things you can do. You can change the angle of the brush. You can get into the brush settings. You can really start modifying some things over here if you really want to. You want to change the angle of that brush. You want to change how much spacing is in between that brush. Like, you can really get minute with it, but we're not worried about that so much today. All I want you to do when you're varying your brush types is just pick a different brush in here, right? Find a charcoal brush, find a soft brush, find something else to paint with, right? This brush, it's a lot sketchier than the other one I was using, right? This is a more charcoaly brush. This is going to create a much different feeling character than the one I'm drawing with my inking brush, my thick and thin inking brush, right? Which is what I want, you know? Much different feel with something like this, okay? So I need to pick a character to draw here. So I'm going to think of one here in just a second. And I'm going to jump through my whole process. Oh, we need to talk about smoothing. So in order for you to do the Totoro assignment, which is talking about smoothing, you'll notice here that sometimes when you're drawing, it can mean that your lines are a little or they're not straight. Sometimes they're a little not smooth, right? There's a little function over here at the top that says smoothing, okay? This can be changed and modified, and what that does is it allows your brush to lag behind just a bit, right? You can tell a massive difference between this line that I drew with no smoothing and this line that I drew with 24% smoothing. Lot cleaner, lot straighter, lot nicer, right? I can really get in there and create really clean, nice lines because I'm able to slow down and let the software do some of the work, right? I'm drawing my circle and I'm letting Photoshop catch up, right? So these are a lot cleaner lines than sometimes when you have 0% smoothing, right? Now, I've gotten pretty confident with my ability to draw nice, solid lines within Photoshop, but I even still use the smoothing function all the time because I enjoy it. I like how it feels when I'm drawing with it, and I like how it looks. Now, there's some where it's really a lot. You can see the delay that, 41% puts on your brush. That can be infuriating when you're trying to ink, but when you're trying to create a really nice shape, maybe it's exactly what you need in order to create the shape that you want. Okay? So test that out. That's what the first assignment is about. You're going to draw that little guy 3 different times and play with the smoothing function just to see how it feels and see what you like. Okay? With that being said, I'm going to draw some simple characters and I'm going to walk you through my process of how that works, right? Start to finish, at least 1, maybe 2 different brushes and how I would ink and change my designs. Okay? So I need to pick a character. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm just looking up some simple characters here. Maybe I'll be inspired by one. I've done so many Pokemon at this point. Now I got to find something that I want to draw. Something simple that I can get through fairly quickly here. Let's see. So that we have time to maybe do multiples. Toad from Mario. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good suggestion. Thinking even simpler than that. Let's see. Yeah. He is very simple, but I'm feeling the Pokemon train right now. Just scrolling through these for a second. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. He's super simple, but it will give me a chance to show you guys some different variations here. And it will be pretty quick and fun. He's also one of my favorites. Okay, we are going to dump Ghastly in here. Okay, so we are going to do Ghastly. Now, he's a little simple, but that's the idea. We want to create some simple stuff, and I want to be able to show you some different styles that we can do with just this, right? So my first thought here is to show you one more thing while we're here, and that's the shape tool, because I feel like it can be useful, but I think we'll hold off on the shape tool because I said hand drawn. So we're going to try to do our best here to draw a really nice, clean circle. And there's also some ways to cheat it too if we do this and use our selection tool, which I think is fair. If we do our selection tool here and create a sphere, then if we hit B on our brush key, we can take our brush and pull along this, right? Now maybe I'll turn my smoothing down a little bit. But we could do something like this and create, you know, some sort of edge here and act like we're still using our brush, right? And it gives me an effect that I kind of like, right? I like this sort of, you know, wobbly line effect that's happening here. And I'm starting my sketch pretty basic. So I'm starting off with a layer 1, which I'm going to call my sketch layer. Okay. And I can click on my layer and double click it. And then I can type in there to label them, right? I want to blow this up just a little bit so I can see a little bit better. So another command really quickly. If you do Control T, Control plus T as in Texas on your keyboard, it will allow you to resize a layer. So I'm just going to resize our Ghastly just a little bit. And then I'm going to come in here and start drawing some of his eyes, which for these, I know I'm going to want to do some smoothing here. And maybe even change my brush size. Turn down my smoothing just a little bit. So have something like this. See, my smoothing is still not enough. I want it up just a little bit more. Hello. We'll bump it up to about 18% here. I'm going to get in there. My one eye is going to come something like this. Maybe even down. See, and then this one I feel like needs to come a little bit more. And this is just my sketch layer. This is the one I can kind of work with a little bit. Play with, because it's not the final layer. Right? So I can tweak this to make this feel good. So I usually come in here and get this feeling right. I have not tried Helldivers 2 yet. So we'll get our Ghastly looking right. So I have this feeling here. And I'm just using the basic brush right now, right? So I want to get his mouth kind of figured out. Maybe bring my brush size down just a hair. Because that brush or that mouth kind of dies into this eye, which is good. And then comes down. He does. And I'm going to clean up some of these lines a little bit as I go through, right? Like I said, this is my sketch layer, the one that I'm building on, right? To get the idea of how I want him to feel and look. So I'm going to erase here. So if I can get the overall feeling there, that's what I want, right? This is still my sketch, so I'm not super worried about getting it 100% clean. But if I can get it almost all the way there, then I'll feel good, right? So I'm going to come back with a new layer and clean stuff up. Okay, so here's that. So I feel pretty good about this right now, pretty quickly. Now I can take this, which is nice, and I can take my first stab, right? Which was here. My hand-drawn stab. This is just my sketch layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that opacity. If you look over here on the right-hand side, there's an opacity drop down that you can do here. And when you hit that drop down, it gives you a slider. And I can change that slider to be a really light layer, right? Then I can come back over here and do a new layer and say, this is my first pass. And then what I'll do is I'll come in with my actual inking brush, my black inking brush, and I'm going to come through here and really try to clean up the lines, right? So maybe I'll turn up my opacity or my smoothing just a little bit to get cleaner lines here on this. especially on these smooth ones that I want, you know, they'll be a little cleaner. And part of me really likes how that ended up looking with that line, and maybe we'll come back to that, but I'm going to try to make this clean. You know, and this is my design. I'm not trying to make this look just like the Pokemon companies, right? I want this to feel like Chase drew this, because the other artist already drew it. I want this to feel like my stuff. So I've got kind of a specific style and feel to my stuff, right? Still want it to be clean. But yeah, I want it to feel like I made this. So I might need to clean up my line here a little bit. I don't really love where this ended up. And you'll see me do this. I will play with the line until it gets to be exactly what I want. Don't mind how that looked. Oh, are they Minecraft songs? I didn't even realize. That's cool. You can tell I'm playing with that line as much as I can. See, I don't love... I feel like I used a tighter brush here, so I'm gonna... Okay, cool. Clean that up a little bit. Now let's go here. Just trying to close off some of my lines. I also want to do the details here. You get an art stream from me. That's fine. I'm not trying to clone stamp. Okay, there we go. I'm going to come through here, and I'm not going to, actually, how do I want to do that? Yeah, I'm going to do exactly what I think I was going to do. So I'm going to come in here with my color layers now. So I'm happy with this kind of art, and I'm going quick because I want to try to push through these. I would probably fix this a little bit more. I don't love exactly how this is drawn, but it's fine. I would probably scoot this in just a little bit. Like, it's kind of bothering me where it's at right now. Like, it should be somewhere in here. In order to kind of match the other side, like it should be more like that. All right. Well, I fixed it anyways. Okay. So, not perfect, but we're moving through it. So we did one brush style, okay? And then I'm going to go through and start doing my color layers, but I'm going to put it underneath my first pass. I'm going to turn off my sketch layer in just a minute. But I'm going to call this color layer 1, right? And I'm going to go through, and I'm actually going to grab, I might pick, you know, this color or something, you know, this dark gray that is here. If it's going to let me. Something here. And I'll use that as my base layer. If I can get in here. Yep, that's fine. So we're going to paint our base layer. That nice gray. And we're going to give him some highlights and lowlights here in just a second. Make sure we get that gray everywhere. Then we'll come back and just kind of clean that up just a little bit. Anywhere where I painted where I don't really want paint, I'll clean up. For right now, that's fine, right? Because I'm going to add more layers. So let's add another layer. This is going to be lights, or we'll say color layer 2. Because then I'm going to do a highlights and lowlights. But I want to grab this kind of white gray that they're using here. For the eyes. I'm just color picking this just because it's quick and easy to do. So let's jump back to my color layer 2. And again, this is a non-destructive workflow, right? I can ink in the eye here and then erase where I maybe overflowed or broke that barrier of the line and just paint in there, right? and I can erase that without erasing the layer underneath it. We'll get some highlights and lowlights here in just a second. We're just painting base color. Right? So we're in there. I think his teeth are the same color, which is great. Makes it easy. Then we've got that pink for his mouth. We'll use the lighter color. And I'm going to create another layer. We'll call this mouth color. And I didn't spell mouth properly, but that's fine. So we'll pick that color now. We'll go over here. I'm pushing I on the keyboard to color pick, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that, but the I key allows me to color pick. So that I can come in here and paint my mouth. Let's go on this layer. And if I do something smart here, if I do it underneath color layer 2, I can paint just right underneath the paint right underneath the tooth right there. And that's showing me maybe where I've missed some areas. And also maybe where I want to change my line art just a little bit. So if I come back to my line art here, and maybe just erase just a hair of the mouth here. I don't know. Depends on how I want that to look. Maybe I just want a little bit of that showing. But I don't know. The other option is just painting it in completely. But I kind of liked the other one. You could see just a little bit of the mouth there. Yeah, let's do that. So let's jump back to my mouth color. Hit back on my brush and we'll just paint that in right there. And I do want to clean up some more of my first pass lines here. Because I do want that tooth to look like it's overlapping right there. So then I can come back to my color layer, hit this guy. My color layer 2, hit this guy, paint that tooth back in. So just cleaning some stuff up. Okay, and then the next thing is to hit it with some highlights and shadows. Now they do some cool stuff with like different colors. I'm gonna hit it with just some highlights and shadows pretty quickly, almost cell shading in a way. And there's a couple different ways we can do that. We could alpha lock this layer. So if we click on this layer, and alpha lock means we can lock it so that it cannot be colored on outside of the color on this layer. So if I hit this right here, you can, let's see. So you now are just painting, oh, image layer pixels, right? Yeah. Okay. So we can alpha lock. If you click this little grid right here, what that means is on this layer, now I can't paint outside of the pixels on this layer, right? So if I come in with some highlights and some shadows on this layer, then I can paint on this layer without being destructive. Now, typically you could do other layers, right? Like it's alpha locked right now. I think if you do this, is it going to let you do the layer below? No, it doesn't. So I'll come in here. We'll come into the color layer here and alpha lock this. And then, or color lock it. And I'm going to come in here with some other colors and do some highlights and shadows. So I'm going to do like maybe a darker gray. Giving birth. Ugh, no, that's weird. So we'll come in here and hit this with some shadows, right? We're going to come around and give him kind of that ghastly look. And maybe even I'll hit him with so we'll hit him with that, which I think looks kind of nice. And then we'll come in with some highlights. Maybe we'll do like a lighter gray here, even lighter. You can come in here and do some of this. And then we'll do one more pass that's kind of like a darker gray. We're doing this cell shaded kind of deal here. So we'll go maybe even almost black here. I'm really just trying to give him this kind of cell shaded ghostly effect, right? With these different kind of layers that are happening here. Then we can come in maybe with these pinks, which I kind of like, and do some of the highlights that they were doing. And this is just one way you could approach it, right? So I come in with a really thin brush now and do some of these fun, like, on this same color layer, do some of these. Okay. And then we can go to our mouth layer. We'll give it, you know, shadow on this one. We can alpha lock this guy, color pick our pink, and just kind of do a darker shade of it. and just give it a mouth shadow. We can go to our color layer 2, alpha lock this one, take our eye color and our tooth color, and even just bring that down a little bit. Give us a little bit of highlights and lowlights here. So you can pick your light source. And then I'm going to come in with one more layer, and it's going to be underneath this color layer. And I have done a bad job of labeling these right now. But I'm going to do our purple. So let's color pick this. And we're going to do our ghastly shade here around him. Now I might want that a little more precise, and honestly I want to turn my smoothing down. Because I do want that to feel a little more shaky. And then I'm going to ink that in. So there's a couple of different ways you could do that. You could fill it with just your paint bucket tool, which I'm going to do. Or you could ink underneath it. Now I'm going to turn off my sketch layer. And I've got something like this, right? I can then take this layer and alpha lock this one. And grab a lighter shade of that same purple and do some fun stuff with this now. Where I do, you know, maybe some highlights in here, since we were kind of doing that shaded of the cell shaded effect to it in some places. I could even take, you know, big blotches of my brush and kind of do something like this. And I've got my ghastly. And for me, I might even do like a darker shade of it and do the same thing. Just to get the that same effect. Okay. So now I've got my version, right? And there's my, you know, my reference. So for me, that reference can go goodbye now. That can get deleted. I just used my selection tool. I think my, I painted my stuff on the wrong layer, but that's okay. This and this layer can get merged, I believe. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So now I have my first pass little ghastly, right? Which is great. Turned out great for being quick and dirty. So now I can take all of these that were on this layer and put them in a folder so that now I have, you know, group 1, and that is my, you know, ghastly 1. Because you're going to take all of these. So now I can click on a group. The nice thing with having a group is I can click on a whole group and move it out of the way. And I can scale groups and move them, right? Because you got to draw 6 of these, right? So I've got my first one. I can keep moving through and, you know, doing some different styles, right? So this one was more of a cell shaded kind of painterly style. Maybe the next one I do, maybe I use this as a guide, right? I take this group and I turn down, you know, I could duplicate this group. Which it will let me do right here. And then I take one of these groups and I move it over, right? And I turn the opacity way down on this whole group. And I use this as a reference for myself, right? Which I'm okay because this is mine. I did this. And then I go in here and start using a different brush. Like maybe I say, okay, well, I did that one with, you know, sort of a cell shaded brush. Maybe I come in and do one that's like a charcoal-y brush, you know? And then I come in and start painting a whole new Ghastly, right? And I can color pick myself, you know, which is nice. If I click on group 1 or whatever, I can color pick my own stuff. I come back, I can start painting with like a charcoal brush, you know. It's gonna feel way different, right? And maybe I do the whole thing with like a charcoaly flavor to it, like turn my thing way down. You know, maybe I take this layer and actually paint it with a little bit of an opacity so I can see what's happening. And I do this Ghastly layer with sort of a charcoaly flavor, right? So then I'm coming in here, I'm going with like a whiter charcoal or a gray charcoal. I come in here and just kind of go back to my group 1. And this is obviously going to have a way different feel than the last thing I painted, right? It's going to feel a lot different. Still trying to adhere to the same principles, right? Like I want to follow this, make it feel good. But I'm doing it with these charcoals instead, so I don't have like a line art pass. I'm just using my charcoal brush. So I've got to do a little bit more work on the back end to make this stuff feel integrated. So just to give you guys some examples, right? Like you're changing up your style. This is a totally different brush, right? Way different approach. So I still need to come in here and turn my opacity back up on this to see how that feels. And maybe that's too dark, right? Like that layer feels dark. So maybe I want to do it with like a gray charcoal instead of a black charcoal. Maybe I need to bump up on my smoothing. Yeah, so I'm just kind of zoning, like I'm in the zone right now, just painting this with the charcoal idea, right? You can obviously tell there's a much different feel here, right? I'm going to turn my opacity down and turn my brush way up here and just kind of do some charcoaly stuff here. I'm going do up my lighter colors. I don't remember which charcoal brush I was on. It was this one, right? Nope, it wasn't. Which charcoal brush was I on? Yeah, that's the one. Okay. Okay, so now let's grab, I don't know, maybe one more light layer of charcoal, because I kind of want to get like this sort of effect happening here. Maybe a really big light brush. So if I do it big and I turn down the opacity, I just kind of, okay. And maybe the dark brush one more time. Kind of. Okay, cool. Okay. Feels a lot better. One more thing here. I'm just going to go one more layer underneath this and do the same thing I did before. Just grab my kind of purpley charcoal here and do my little mess here, except for I'm going to turn my opacity way back up. I'm going to do my... Okay, then I'm going to alpha lock this, and then I'm going to do the same thing I was doing before. We'll take this color, go back to my brush, throw down my opacity. I'm just going to hit it with this. Just kind of give it some flair, right? Then we'll hit it with the darker. Same thing. Just lightly tapping with that charcoal brush, right? But now I can turn off this group 1 copy. I can actually even delete this, right? Because now I have my second one, right? Now I've got 2 different Ghastlies painted, 2 different brushes, right? Drastically different. One cell shaded, one done with more of a charcoal flare, right? And I can keep going, right? I could keep swapping up brushes, changing my style. And you're going to do 6 of these. And then just what I'd like you to do is just organize them nicely on the page, right? Make them look nice. Okay. So, I could sit here and do 4 more, but I don't want to waste anybody's time too much. You saw me do 2. It would be a similar approach every time, right? I'm going to grab a brush I like, and I'm going to start piecing it together and building out my layers, right? And then try to come to a finished product. Okay. I'm supposed to give you breaks. This is a pretty quick, straightforward assignment. So, we've been live for almost 2 hours, so we'll call it here. And I'll let you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, finish up your stuff. You can watch this back as many times as you want. Yeah. So you're just going to draw your 6 different characters, simple characters, change up your brush, change up your painting technique a little bit. You know, you saw that, you know, I did one that was more cell shaded, right? Used a really hard edge. This one was charcoal, so it was a lot softer, right? A lot different effect between, much different effect between the 2, right? And that's all you got to do. For the smoothing assignment, I want them all in the same canvas. So use that Control T command that I showed you. So do 1 layer where you draw the little guy with a smoothing percentage, right? Then buff up that smoothing percentage or change it and draw them again. Keep them all on 1 canvas though, because I want you to label it. I want you to say this one was with 0, this one was with 16%, this one was with 40%, right? And I want to be able to see it in 1 PNG file. So when you're done, you just do File, Export, and you can do a quick export as PNG, and you can turn that in. Okay? And that's it for the assignment. So you'll do 6 of these, okay? Any other questions? If not, I'm going to let everybody go. We'll jump off of this for now. Okay. Great start. Really fun. This assignment's super fun. So have fun with it. Pick a character you really enjoy and have fun drawing them a few times and changing it up. Make them look a little different every time. Change the feel, right? Okay. All right, everybody. Oh, class. Yes. The code for today is going to be, I'll type it right here. Your attendance question for today, or your answer, your secret word is, that's your answer for today's lecture. Okay. I'll type it in the chat. Ghost type. Turn it in as 3 different files. Delete it. That's okay. If you've already turned it in and it's 3 separate files, that's fine. No worries. It's just a little easier to grade if all 3 of them are right there and I can just kind of tell the difference between them instead of having to open up 3 files. It's not a huge deal, but if you haven't turned it in yet, please turn it in as 1 file. If not, it can be 3 separate files. It's not a big deal. Okay. Is there anybody in here that's hyped for the new Final Fantasy game that's coming out tomorrow? Or it might already be out where you guys are at. I know I am. Mine's showing up tomorrow at my house. Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time, so pretty stoked about it. It was my birthday this weekend, which was pretty cool. My wife bought me this. I'll show you something cool if you haven't left yet. There's you guys. Look at you guys right there. My wife bought me a Steam Deck, which is probably my favorite gaming purchase I've ever had. Pretty stoked about it. Oh, I am playing Elden Ring on my Steam Deck, so I too am hyped about the Elden Ring DLC. I am a huge From Software fan, so I am also hyped about that. Super hyped. Okay. Well, I was waiting for questions to come through. If not, have a good rest of your day, everybody. Okay. I am happy that we got to spend a little bit of time together. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, what did I do to my stuff here? Is it okay if my drawing skills are really bad? Yes, that's okay. Remember that we talked about it being an intro course, and the idea is that you are trying your best, right? That's the idea. Okay. Following following the instructions. Make sure you're doing what I ask in the assignment, and you will be just fine. Okay? Still try your hardest. Put some effort into it. Make it look good. But yes, it's okay. I understand that some of you are new to art. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you. I will catch you guys next week. Okay? See ya.